Good evening and welcome to Current Issues. I'm your host, Hesham Tillawi. Tonight, ladies and gentlemen, we will be visiting again the Palestinian prisoners. A couple of weeks ago, we brought you the story of a prisoner who had went through a hunger strike, like 200 and some days. Tonight, sadly, we bring you a story of another prisoner who died in captivity. But his story is not just because he died in captivity. We had another prisoner who died only weeks ago. But this particular story, it has a human touch to it. Now, I know all political prisoner stories have a human touch to it, but this one is unique. Imagine if you have cancer and your doctors don't tell you about it. Imagine if you only have months to live and your doctors don't tell you about it. Imagine if you have days to live and your doctors don't tell you about it. Well, this is the story of a Palestinian prisoner who has been a prisoner in Israeli jail for the last 10 years. Now, when we say Palestinian prisoners, those are not prisoners who stole something and went to prison, or they sold drugs and went to prison, or whatever. These are not criminal prisoners. These are political prisoners, and their crime is resisting the Israeli occupation of their land. Just imagine if we have the Chinese or the Russians occupy the United States, and the good Americans go out there and resist. You've seen the movie Red Dawn. Well, it's about 15, 20 years ago, but it talks about the occupation of the southern part of the United States by Russians and Cubans. And the American people have resisted. Of course, towards the end of the movie, they were able to actually liberate their country. Well, that's what the Palestinians have been doing for the last 63 years, 64 years. Now, how are they resisting? They go out in the streets, protesting the occupation, protesting the imprisonment of their children, of their men, women, husbands, brothers, sons, and daughters. They go out there throwing rocks at Israeli tanks, at Israeli jeeps, that's the weapon of choice for the Palestinians. That's probably the heaviest of all the weapons they have, slingshots, and throwing rocks, while the Israeli soldiers have the best weapons available. They have the bombers that bomb the heck out of cities, killing tens and hundreds. They have the bombs that destroys homes, and etc., etc. On top of that, you have the Israeli settlers, the illegal, I don't really like to call it settlers, because, you would think about like the pioneers who came from Europe to settle the United States. But these are thugs with guns who basically go into Palestinian land and take over the land, protected by the Israeli soldiers and Israeli army, and very much harassing the local Palestinians, and they build their settlements. And when we talk about settlements, these are not just caravans or tents. No, these are huge cities, as you see here in these pictures. There's over 650,000, almost close to probably more than 700,000 Israeli settlers in the West Bank alone. Now, these settlers, they go into land protected by the Israeli army with bulldozers, and they very much start bulldozing farmland that belongs to Palestinian villagers, and they set up these huge settlements that are paid for by you, the American taxpayers. Now, the Israelis, they do imprison Palestinians, young men, children, old men, women, they have them all. And what is the charge? Many of them are in Israeli jails and prisons without charge. And that was the story that we brought you a couple of weeks ago, 3 weeks, 4 weeks ago, about the prisoner who was on a hunger strike for 200 plus days because he was there for that long. Well, actually, he was there for a couple of years before that, and he was released in an exchange, and then he was taken back. And all he wanted to do is charge me or let me go. So he went on a hunger strike. But Mayssara Abu Hamdyieh, he died Tuesday, just a couple of days ago. 64 years old, a father, a husband. He died of cancer. Meyssere actually 2 or 3 months ago, actually in June of last year, he got sick. So he went to, well, he actually didn't go anywhere because he was in prison. He was shackled in prison. And he got sick, so he asked for medical treatment, and doctors saw him, told him everything is okay, he'll be all right, and within a couple of months, he lost about 30 pounds. Only last week, the Israeli doctors told him that he has cancer and he probably has few days to live in prison. So they did not tell him that he had cancer when they first checked him out, or when they did not treat him for cancer. They just let him without treatment to die in prison until his case got public attention, the media attention. Then the Israelis started taking him. They moved him from prison into a hospital in prison in the last few days. Now, while he was in prison receiving what supposedly be chemotherapy, when he was on his on hospital bed, his hands were handcuffed to the hospital bed. Imagine that. A dying man, and his crime is resisting on the streets of Palestine the occupation of the Israeli Zionists, taking his homeland, killing his people, demolishing their homes. On his last days of dying, then they decided to take him to the hospital because he would have died in jail, in prison, just like many prisoners, Palestinian prisoners, died in prison, in Israeli prisons. They took him because his case got the attention of the media. Then the Israelis were forced to actually take him into the hospital in prison and tell him that you only have, oh, by the way, you have cancer. So for months and months and months, they did not tell him what he had. They did not give him the proper treatment, but yet, when they were forced to do something about it, they told him that you are dying of cancer. And on top of that, when he was dying of cancer and he only had days to live, they handcuffed him into the hospital bed as if he was going to do something. The man was at the end of his life, handcuffed to hospital bed. Now, I want to show you 2 old pictures. They're black and white pictures. And then we will tell you where these pictures come from. This is one of them. And this is another one. Now take a wild guess where this hospital was and where those nurses were in this picture. Well, they were in the Nazi concentration camps. Remember the 6 million figure that the Zionists always throw out, that the Nazis have killed 6 million Jews during the Holocaust? Well, they had hospitals in those concentration camps. They were taking care of the sick in those concentration camps. They were operating open heart surgeries, etc., in those concentration camps. Many Jews were born in those concentration camps. So they had hospitals. Even the Nazis who are still accused of killing 6 million Jews had hospitals to take care of the sick in the concentration camps. But yet, in the 21st century, in a state that is known to be, as our politicians tell us, that our friends, we share their values. Now, we went through the sharing values a lot on this program. But are these values that we, as Americans, share with Israel? Letting people die? Their main crime is they were on the streets resisting the occupation, the torture, the home demolition, the bombing, the killing of their people and their children. That's their crime. We got a couple of very short videos to shed some more lights on actually what happened in the last couple of days in Palestine. We will go to those videos now.
Officials in the West Bank are raising the alarm over the death of a Palestinian prisoner held by Israel. They claim the death of Abu Hamdyieh is the result of medical negligence, with Israel refusing to release him despite his deteriorating health. Let's get more on this from RT's Irina Galushko, who is live now from Tel Aviv. Irina, what are the implications of his death?
Well, basically, you have to understand that we're talking about a 64-year-old man who has been in custody for more than 10 years. He started feeling ill last summer, and he has asked the authorities for checkups, but they basically have done those checkups, but never told him exactly what was happening. And even though the man was obviously emaciated, he lost more than 15 kilos in less than 2 months, they still kept him in the dark, as well as his family, until they told him just in March of this year that he basically had terminal cancer and literally had days left to live. Now, of course, this is something that left a lot of Palestinians incredibly angry. In fact, we can expect protests throughout several cities of Palestinian Authority, but we do know at this point that in several Israeli jails, Palestinian prisoners are already staging mass actions of protest. They are throwing things around and banging on their cell doors, because this is not the first time that something like this has happened. Just in February, another Palestinian inmate, just 30 years old, died of an apparent heart attack. So the Minister for Prison Affairs of the Palestinian Authority has already said that Israeli actions in this instance are heinous, because the prisoner did not receive timely medical help, and he also called for an international investigation into death of Abu Hamdyieh. Now, this isn't, like I said, this isn't the first time that something like this has happened. Abu Hamdyieh was in jail since 2002.
Okay. Well, he died Tuesday, and they buried him today. We do have a video to show what took place during his burial today. And also, yesterday, now he died Tuesday, but on the news of his death, many Palestinian youth went out to the streets protesting his death, protesting the way he died. And the Israelis killed, yesterday they killed 2 of them, 2 cousins, a 17-year-old Amr Nassar and Naji Bilbaisi, around the city of Tulkarem. This is Amr Nassar and his cousin Naji, they were both gunned down by Israeli soldiers. Their crime? They got angry and went out in the streets of their cities, just like these people did, protesting the death of Mayssara. This is the burial of the two cousins in Tulkarem, in Anabka actually, close to Tulkarem in Palestine, in the West Bank. And today, it was the burial of Meyssara, who died in prison, in the hospital. You know, couldn't they just, they knew he was dying. I mean, a few days ago, when they decided to take him to the hospital, they knew he was dying. Why didn't they just release him to go to his family, to live the next couple of days with his family? You know, I don't care if they are cold-hearted Zionists or not. But for God's sake, I mean, people go out there to save the whale and save this and save that. Couldn't they find it in their heart? The man was dying. The man was dying. They told him, you only have few days left. Couldn't they release him? I guess not. I guess people who have the heart to kill little children and bomb little children, they're not going to have the heart to release a prisoner who's dying to go spend the last couple of days of his life with his family. But you know what? That has a lot to do with their mentality. And no, we do not share any of their values, period. To them, a goyim who's non-Jew is not human. And their death, now if it was a Jew, it's totally different. But goyims, there are no values. And I didn't say that, they said that. They put no value on a goyim's life. Now, I have no idea where our leaders come from when they say we share these people's values. We don't share their values. I don't know if you share their values. I definitely don't. And I know many of you do not share those values. At the end, prisoners have rights. And this man is definitely a prisoner of war. And prisoners of war have rights. Forget about war. Forget about conflicts. He's a human, for God's sake. He's a human who had a cancer. They told him about it a few days before he died. And they could not find it in their heart to release him. Let's see what happened during his funeral today.
For now, the West Bank city of Hebron is flooded with thousands of those who came for the funeral of a former Palestinian security officer. Mayssara Abu Hamdyieh died from cancer while serving a life sentence in an Israeli jail after allegedly being refused adequate medical care. His death has triggered a wave of riots and clashes between Palestinians and Israeli forces, which so far resulted in 2 teenagers being killed by soldiers. This amid a massive hunger strike among Palestinian prisoners across Israeli jails, as well as rocket exchanges between Hamas and Israel. Let's get all the latest now from the funeral, and RT's Irina Galushko filed this report.
His body has been delivered to the Hebron Mosque, after which the funeral procession will head to the cemetery. When we were getting here this morning, actually, we already saw kids on the streets pelting stones at the IDF forces down in Hebron. So we can expect, I think, violence to unfold here a little bit further on, because Hamdiye's numerous supporters here, along with their Kalashnikov rifles, and they're firing live rounds in the air. You cannot hear them right now, but they're sporadically coming on and off. The event of his death has left a lot of people unhappy, and numerous protests all over the entire Palestinian territory in the West Bank, resulting in 2 Palestinian deaths. And you can say that the tensions are running extremely high, especially here in Hebron, of course. People are driving around shouting slogans and basically expressing their anti-Israeli sentiments. The 64-year-old Hamdie was serving a life sentence on charges of terrorism. He has complained about feeling unwell last summer. He was essentially told that he has cancer and literally days left to live. And this was the second Palestinian prisoner who has died in just as many months in an Israeli jail. The Palestinian officials already said that the Israeli government is directly to blame for not providing enough medical help to him. And they're saying that the Palestinian prisoners, of which there's almost 5,000 in Israeli jails, are being constantly mistreated and not treated as human beings. What you can see right now is the body of Mayssara Abu Hamdyieh actually being moved from the mosque towards the cemetery. You can see he's on the truck right there. We can see his guards armed with Kalashnikovs. Literally 4,000 or 5,000 people here in this little square in front of the mosque in Hebron. So frustration, anger, and we can see probably an escalation of violence happening in the next maybe even couple of hours.
Well, Mayssara Abu Hamdyieh is dead in Israeli prison. Now, cancer is a killer, and he died of cancer. Many people die of cancer. Could he have lived longer if he received treatment? Well, of course, I mean, if you believe in destiny, and if you believe that God, when it's your time to go, your time to go, it doesn't matter if it's cancer or not. But I do believe that medical treatment has proven, and again, if you also still, believe that when it's your time to go, well, I guess people who receive treatment for cancer and live for many years after being diagnosed with cancer, I guess it wasn't their time to go. So we're not going to debate that he would have lived longer if he received treatment, because that's going to, I guess, start another controversy of, is our time predestined? So do we know, or is it already written when we're going to die? Now, many people who believe in God and believe in faith, I mean, if it's Christians or Muslims, or I don't know if Jews believe in that too, but believe when it's your time to go, your time to go. No one can stop it. There's no question about that. But since giving medical treatment is a human thing, for God's sake, when your dog gets sick, you take him to the vet. And if he has a tumor, you pay sometimes maybe thousands of dollars to operate on him, and he's a dog. Okay? Now, I don't want to belittle anybody's dog out there, so, but we're comparing a human life to a dog here. When a dog can receive treatment and a human cannot receive treatment just because he is Palestinian, just because he is from the Goyim, not from the chosen people. Because they believe they're chosen. They believe they're different than others. They believe they are made up totally different. They believe that God is going to be pleased with them when they purge the Holy Land out of all the non-Jews there. And as they believe, and this is their belief, I'm not making this up. Now, the Goyim who remain on the land, they are to be enslaved for the service of the Jews. That's what these people believe in. Otherwise, they're going to kick them out or kill them. They believe in purifying themselves and redeem themselves when they redeem the land, when they purify the land from the non-Jews. Now, if you really think about this, number one, Zionists are not religious. As a matter of fact, Jews early on in the late 1800s, when Zionism first started, religious Jews, they actually opposed it. They fought it because the ones who started the Zionist movement were not religious. Until now, there are many Jews who actually oppose Zionism. But now we have a breed of Zionists controlling the Holy Land. They are this fundamentalists, and the government that was created one day before President Obama visited a couple of weeks ago, it is a right-wing government. It's a settlers government. And we told you what settlers are. You know, these are thugs with guns roaming the hills of Palestine, terrorizing the original people who lived and has been living on the land for thousands of years. These people who came from New York, from Manhattan, these people who came from Europe, the United States, Australia, and Canada, these are Europeans who think just because they converted into Judaism in Europe, they think they have the right to go kill the people in the Holy Land and drive them off their land that they have been living on for thousands of years. You know, when you really think about this, just because they converted. Now, our president went there a couple of weeks ago and he said that he was so happy that he is walking in the steps of Abraham, and he called it the Jewish land. It is not Jewish land. Palestine is not Jewish land. Jews did live in Palestine. No one denies that. But it wasn't just Jews living in Palestine. You know, remember in Genesis, where we have 13 different tribes and different people, and it's not just the 13 tribes of the Jews. That's totally different. But in Genesis, it names many people who lived on the land who were not Jews. Now, Abraham was not a Jew. Moses, who got them out of Egypt, and they say they were kicked out of Egypt. No, they were not kicked out of Egypt. They decided to move out of Egypt and go into, I guess they were in the Sinai desert for 40 years. And Moses did not even get them to the Holy Land, to the Promised Land. Who promised it? And what were the conditions for that promise? You know, you read your Bible. Read it and understand it. What was the promise? What were the chosen people for? What were they chosen for? Is it that they were chosen because they're better? You really believe that? You believe that God, that created all of us, you really believe that God is going to choose certain people and say, I choose those people over everybody else? Have you ever asked yourself, chose for what? Because I can't choose you to a chore and tell you if you do it, I'm going to give you something. Now, if you don't do it, you can't come back and say, oh, I'm going to, pay when you did not do anything. Read your Bible, and you will find out that they reneged on the promise with God, the covenant that they made with God, they reneged on it. And it wasn't that he chose them because they were better. No. They were killing every prophet that God sent to them. They were chosen to straighten out. Just like you choose gangs to put them in rehabilitation camps. Think about that. You think God is going to choose another human being? Now, they don't believe that they are like us. They don't believe that. They literally don't believe that. They believe that they're made different. Now, do you think God is going to choose a human being over another human being? No, he's not. If you believe that God is the God of equality and justice for all, because God is just, he's not going to prefer somebody over somebody else except with your good deeds. With your good deeds. That's how you are going to be in the eyes of God if you are better than so-and-so. But don't think you're better. And then if he said you, that doesn't mean you're the rest of your offsprings for the next 10,000 years. But 2,000 years later, we still talk about the chosen people. Many of you still believe in this chosen people thing. We are in the 21st century, for God's sake, and many of you still believe in myths. Think about this. Fine, you believe in that. Well, don't let your belief, if your religion believes in one thing, that's fine, keep it to yourself. Because religions are to be kept to yourselves. But don't let your religious beliefs kill other people. That's where the problem is with those fundamentalists. And Israel is full of those fundamentalist Jews who go on with their guns, take a land, set up camp. The Israeli army protects them. They start harassing Palestinians. And before you know it, it's cities. It's huge cities on top of these mountains in Palestine. And they call them settlements. Something that Obama, he said, now American presidents have been saying that settlements are obstacles to peace. And they are. How can you ask and talk about peace when you are taking the other party or the other side, you're taking their land and you're bringing your people in a land that was agreed upon in the Oslo peace agreements back in 1993 between the Palestinians, the Israelis, and Bill Clinton, that within 5 years you're going to have a viable Palestinian state. When you hear Netanyahu talks, he talks about, our Palestinian neighbors. We believe in the two-state solutions. What two-state solutions? There's no more. You cannot have a two-state solutions when you're bringing 1 million of your people to live amongst 2 million. Because in the West Bank there are about 2 million Palestinians. When you bring in 1 million settlers, well, that's about half of the population. And you talk about two-state solutions? How? Now, the question is, the Palestinians are resisting the occupation. Now, let's put that map on. Now, we put this map on. If you've seen it for the first time, we will explain it to you. But if you've seen it before, what it boils down to is before 1946, like in the late 1800s, early 1900s, Palestine looked like the one on the left, where you have nothing but Palestinians. And when I say Palestinians, we mean Palestinians, Muslims, Christians, and some Palestinian Jews. Then we come to 1946, where you have a little bit of green started to show up on the map, and these are basically Jews who left Europe and came to Palestine. Very few. Now, the green, that's the land they actually owned somehow, and they brought their people from Europe and elsewhere to live there. The next picture is 1947 partition plan, when the United Nations said, okay, we have enough problem here. And England, who was at that time, had mandate after First World War. They took over Palestine, and they had the mandate back in 1921. Well, the Israeli Jews were the one Israelis at that time, but the Jews started actually terrorizing the Palestinians, the local population, and at the same time going after the British. Well, Britain in 1947 decided it had enough of these terrorists like Menachem Begin and Ishaq Shamir, who were actually in Israeli terrorist organization, Jewish terrorist organizations in the 1920s, 30s, and early 40s. So England went to the United Nations and said, I don't want the mandate on Palestine anymore. The Jews are strong enough, we got them organized, and we want to turn over this Palestine and the government to them. So in 1947, you have that third. That's how the United Nations envisioned Palestine to look like. Green is for the Jews, yellow is for the Arabs, Palestinians, and Muslims and Christians. In 1948, England left, Israel was born, took over the land that was allocated for them by the United Nations partition plan, and on top of that, land that was allocated for the Arab state. And in 1967, Israel took over the other part that you see on the right-hand side, the second from right. That's the map of Palestine, where the yellow and that little yellow on the left, that's Gaza Strip, and the one on the right, that's the West Bank. That's basically what the 1993 Oslo Peace Agreement was all about, that a Palestinian state will be set up on that land. Well, now the map looks totally different, where you have on the right-hand side the West Bank almost chopped in half and more, with walls surrounding many of those cities. And if you see on the map on the right-hand side, you will see some lines there. Well, that is where the wall and where settlement highways are actually dividing what was left of the West Bank, where the majority of the Palestinians live. So you see now that it's impossible to have a two-state solution, as everybody's talking about. You know, President Obama's talking about it, Netanyahu's talking about it, the Palestinians are talking about it, but physically, it's impossible. It's impossible when the government of Israel that was born just a day before Obama went there a couple of weeks ago, most of it is made up of settlers. The housing minister lives in a settlement, in an illegal settlement. So they have a government that is made up of settlers, because they still, even though they live in the West Bank, not in Israel, they live in the West Bank, but they can vote in Israeli elections. And since there's almost 1 million of them, well, they are a very powerful voting bloc. And since most of them are right-wing, because left-wing, they're more liberals, they understand that we have to find, that's what Ishaq Rabin was. He was within the labor camp, and they understood that enough fighting, let's talk. They started to talk, they agreed. But then since then, it's many, Netanyahu, he very much is like Sharon. Sharon was the one who actually built that wall and decided to build a wall around Palestinian cities and towns. So the way it is now, the government of Israel is saying something, but they're doing totally the opposite. They're saying that, oh yeah, we want peace. Yeah, let's sit down and talk. Well, the Palestinians, President Obama went there. Now, the Palestinians have been talking since 93, have been negotiating since 93. And they have been complaining that, look, we sit down, we talk about things. Israel does not hold its own part of the bargain. They always renege. But you know what? Read what they say on Yom Kippur, their annual prayers that they offer to God. In it they say, ahead of time, all agreements I'm going to make with the Goyim are null and void. You see, this thing came up when they were in Babylon. So they wanted, and it's a myth when people think that Jews were thrown out of Palestine 2,000 years ago and sent to Babylon. No. The majority of Jews remained on the land. Only the leaders, the military and political leaders and their families, 5,000 and their families, which historians say about 20 to 25,000 were taken into Babylon. Like the top, the elite and their families. 5,000 of them were taken to Babylon. But yet, if you read the history that you read, you think it was they very much wiped them out of Palestine and took them to Babylon. It's not true. The majority of them remained on the land. So these, to live in their new environment, they came up with that prayer. They came up with many things, many rules, that it's okay to kill a non-Jew, the Goyim, but it's a big sin to kill another Jew. It's okay to rape. I'm not making this up, ladies and gentlemen. Don't believe me? Go look it up. It's okay to rape a Goyim, but you get the death penalty if you rape a Jew, especially if it's an underage. But it's okay to rape underage Goyim because they're not considered humans, or whatever Jews are, or whatever they think they are. But that prayer in Yom Kippur, what they say is, it's a long thing, and I think one time we said the whole thing, but one of the things that they say is, every agreement that I make with the Goyim is null and void. They still do that. So is it surprised that they sit down with the Palestinians? They make all these agreements. They tell the Palestinians, okay, you got this area around here, the West Bank and Gaza. They've been saying that since 93. But yet, they're bringing their settlers from Europe, elsewhere, and wherever they can get them from, and they move them to Palestine, where now there's 700,000 among 2 million. You do the math. And they're still building and building and building. And they said it. It's not something that they did not say. Back in 92, Yitzhak Shamir was the prime minister of Israel. And when they went to the Madrid, for those of you who follow this stuff, you probably remember the Madrid Peace Conference that actually George Bush, the father, not the Son and the Holy Spirit, but the father, he started that. He said, okay, we're going to get after the first Iraq war in 1991. He said, we're going to get the Palestinians and Israelis to solve this problem for them. So they went to Madrid, and supposedly they talked about peace with the Palestinians. Well, Yitzhak Shamir at that time was the prime minister of Israel. And ehneh, one of the Israeli newspapers, they asked him, they said, are you serious about this peace for land formula? Because that's what they talked about. Give us peace, we give you land. As if Israel is afraid of the Palestinians. As if Israel really asking the Palestinians to give them peace and we will give you your land. Well, that whole formula was null and void from the beginning. Because if Israel wanted peace, all they have to do is say to the Palestinians, we are taking our occupation force out of your land. Because the Palestinians are not armed like Israel, so there's what peace? You know, Israel has nuclear bombs. And all the Palestinians are saying, look, you got that other part of Palestine, we recognize you as Israel, we recognize you as a state, just fine where you are, just give us this little piece, 10% of what's left of Palestine, and let us make our own, establish our own Palestine on it. But Israel has a different view. So when Prime Minister Yitzhak Shamir was asked about this reporter, are you serious about this deal, land for peace, peace for land? He said no. He said we're going to sit down and negotiate with them for the next 10 years. And in the next 10 years, we're going to have 500,000 settlers. Well, he said souls. 500,000 souls living, settling on the land, on the hills in the West Bank. And he was right. Because 10 years after they signed the so-called peace agreement, peace initiative, the Oslo Peace Initiative, or agreement, whatever you want to call it, I don't call it an agreement at all, because it was basically an agreement to talk about peace in the future. Of course, the Palestinians did not know that Israel had in mind to actually talk about peace for the rest of eternity whenever it comes. So, the Israelis have no intention of negotiating peace because they said it, their leaders said it, that we are going to sit down and negotiate. They said it just 2 weeks ago, one day before Obama went there. They said, we're not going to allow Obama to force any settlements. And Obama, before he left here, he said, I'm not bringing anything with me, I'm just coming to visit. He said, I'm not bringing any new ideas. And when he went there, he very much gave the Jews everything they've been asking for. He called it a Jewish land. He called Jerusalem eternal city, even though international law recognizes Israel as international city. It's for everybody. It's for Christians, Muslims, and Jews. Now, Christians and Muslims agreed to that formula that, hey, look, Jerusalem, it's city of peace. All three religions have very important shrines there. The Church of the Holy Sepulchre is there, where Jesus was buried, according to the Christian faith. Now, of course, Jews don't believe that, because they don't believe he was the Messiah anyway. You know, they believe that Mary had conceived Jesus by a Roman soldier, and she brought him. When people found out about him, she said, oh, well, look, he's the messenger of God. He's God. That's what they believe. Now, Muslims believe totally the opposite. They do believe the Immaculate Conception of Jesus. They do believe that his own coming to earth was sent by God to set us straight. Muslims believe that. They revere Jesus and his mother, the Blessed Mother. As a matter of fact, Jesus is mentioned about 25 times in the Quran, in the holy book of the Muslims. Muhammad, who's the prophet and messenger of God, according to Muslims, is only mentioned 5 times. So go figure. But yet, when you talk to Christians, they think that Jews are closer to Christians than Muslims. It's the other way around. It's the other way around. Jews don't believe in Jesus, period. Muslims do believe in the message of Jesus. So is it the media? Is it the education? What is it that makes Christian don't know much about Islam and think that it's a foreign religion, when in fact Islam tells you, look, we go all the way back to Abraham. Islam is the only religion because, Christianity looks at Judaism in a funny way. Not the real Judaism. I'm not talking about the craziness out there. Islam respects, and as a Muslim, you are to believe in these religions. You are to believe in Abraham and Moses and Isaac and David and Solomon and Jesus and John. You are to believe in all this. Islam is not a new religion. It's a continuation of the original message, God's message. Since we, all three religions, go back to Abraham, well, that's what Muslims believe. It's an Abrahamic religion, just like Christianity and Islam. It's a continuation. But that wasn't our subject, actually, religion. But sometimes when I get talking about religion, I find myself going down that very thin, or walking on a very thin rope, but that's okay. The message tonight is, Israel is a criminal state, and we do not share any values with Israel. Having a prisoner die, not even telling him. Imagine if you're dying of cancer and your doctor does not tell you. Just imagine how horrible that is. They tell you a few days before. And a few days before, when they take you to the hospital, you're handcuffed to a hospital bed as if you are going to run, or even if you have the strength to actually do anything when you are bound to that hospital bed. Anyway, well, tonight's program was about human. It was about you and I and the human race. People go to war. People kill each other in war. But then we all go back to our basic humanity. And our basic humanity says you should have a room, a very small room in your heart for a dying man. And his wish was to see his children and be with them in his last couple of days. But even that, they did not give him. Well, ladies and gentlemen, that's all we have for you. As we always say, go do the right thing. Good night. We'll see you 2 weeks from now.